Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome once again for Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent computer role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look at a Lovecraft-based RPG that I covered back when it was still in the crowdfunding stage some years ago. It has finally come out into final release a couple years back, so I'm a little bit late to this one. Developed by Cultic Games and published by 1C Entertainment, Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones was released back in 2019, so a couple years ago now. Stygian, Reign of the Old Gods strives to be a story-heavy RPG with action point-based, turn-based tactical combat. What it ends up being is a little bit different, although I'll get into that. It does have multiple classes, various skills, and a variety of equipment, weapons, and crafting options. Much of the actual story advancement depends more on investigation and exploration, which is fitting for the genre. In terms of plot, the game takes place in a sort of post-apocalyptic version of the city of Arkham. It's the early 20th century and the Old Ones have arrived, plunging the city into despair and cutting it off from the rest of the world. Now this all happened some time ago when the game starts, apparently, and you play a character who had dreams of a dismal man before everything turned like that. Now that events have happened, you are once more visited in your dreams by this man and are driven to seek him out to figure out what his appearance may have meant. When you start the game, you create a character. You select between male or female, then select an age. While the gender of the character mostly affects dialogue options, the age, young, adult, or old, will modify your initial attributes, but also give you skill points, with younger characters offering a bonus to an attribute, but less skill points overall, and older characters suffering a penalty to one attribute, but more skill points overall. You then pick an archetype, effectively the classes of the game. There's the academic, the aristocrat, criminal, explorer, investigator, occultist, performer, and soldier. Now each of these offers 3 skills that can be improved to the maximum level, as well as setting a minimum score for one attribute. These can also affect dialogue choices as you play the game. Each of these archetypes has a number of backgrounds, one of which is neutral, while the others can specialize a character by offering bonuses to skills or specific traits, but also offering some sort of trade-off as well. You can then select a belief system. There's humanistic, materialistic, nihilistic, divine, rational, and esoteric. Each one can offer different dialogue choices during play, as so many of these choices do, which you can then use to regain sanity during conversations. After this, you select a portrait and then you set your name. The final step of character creation involves distributing your initial attribute and skill points. There are 6 attributes. There's physique, agility, senses, mind, will, and presence, each of which alters aspects of the game that are associated with it. For instance, physique impacts your melee skill, mind impacts things like medicine and science, etc. These may be raised to a maximum of 10 during character creation. Then there's the skills. Skills include athletics, firearms, investigation, medicine, melee, occult, psychology, science, speechcraft, stealth, subterfuge, and survival. A few of these, firearms and melee, are combat activities. Others can be used in dialogue, exploration, and investigation, and during camping. A summary of derived stats is given to one side, although you can further check on these during play. The derived stats include health and sanity, which keep your character alive and sane, respectively, action points that are used during your turn in combat, reaction that determines when a character goes in combat, and then stealth value to avoid detection while stealthing around during exploration. The basic combat stats follow. Each character has a melee attack rating and damage bonus, a ranged attack rating, a throwing attack rating, and a throwing range, then a spellcraft skill for combat casting. There is a chance to get a crit success or failure during combat, defenses against physical or supernatural effects and attacks, then damage resistance and mental resistance to preserve your health and your sanity. Finally, there's the research skills, occult, scientific, and medical, which are used during camping to uncover new recipes or details about items and artifacts that you pick up. You get one last chance to review your character's abilities before confirming into the game proper. After a brief intro scene, you are left to explore. The exploration screen shows the map that you're on in a fine illustrated art style. Along the bottom are your party portraits, and you can have a few companions, then quick icons to review your character, your inventory, and your grimoire. You can enter in the stealth mode, view your journal, your map, and then change the game options. Aside from entering stealth mode and changing game options, most of these just go into the tabbed character sheet screen, so you can access them from that particular screen. The character sheet itself lets you review your stats, your current status, as well as your current experience and angst. This is the same screen that you come up to when you level up. Experience accrues and will often offer a level up at appropriate levels, while angst will trigger certain effects as it builds up, including the obtaining of certain insanity traits. You can review your perks and abilities here. As you level, you get access to a perk. These perks may require certain skill and attribute levels, and not all of them are actually flat bonuses. Some of them offer a bonus, but also a mild drawback as well. You can review your traits that you acquire through angst over time as well, and these are very similar to traits in that they can have both a drawback but also a mild bonus. They're kind of like the inverse of traits. The inventory screen lets you review your inventory and your character's equipment slots and offers a quick summary of relevant combat stats below. Characters may equip a head slot item, a body slot item, up to 4 artifacts, and 2 sets of items in the hands, be they weapons or other tools. One can also equip a container to boost their inventory and up to 5 quick slot items. Switching between active characters will allow you to adjust their equipment as well. Your overall inventory slots are based on how much your party overall can carry, and aside from various categories of equipment, weapons, wearables, consumables, tools, researchable items, crafting items, etc., one can also view a quick total of the party's cigarettes, which are used for currency in the game, rations, eaten while adventuring, camping supplies, which allow you to camp outside of safe houses, and then crafting kerosene, which is used to create items. The Grimoire tab will allow you to review your spells and rituals that you learn during play, and you can equip up to 5 quick spells to use during combat through the right-click menu. There's a map of the main area that you adventure in, which you can use to quickly traverse between areas, and then the Arkham map itself, which shows not only the city, but the area around the city that you started. Finally, there's the journal, where you can review information on your quests, as well as what you've learned about various beings and recipes that you've come across. As far as actual exploration, you can navigate the map by clicking on it. There is a key to highlight some interactable areas. Most of these involve examining items or looting them, but right-clicking on some items will open a menu where you can use relevant skills. Maps are generally transitioned between via doors or footsteps on the ground, and some maps are larger than a screen, while some are smaller, so on the larger ones you may have to actually scroll around a bit. All in all, the exploration portion of the game plays very much like a point-and-click adventure, with items to interact with and search, NPCs and shopkeepers to engage in dialogue with, and so forth. Your options in this matter actually grow the more NPCs that you get in your party, and besides from the 2 companions that you can select, you can also have hirelings, which are treated a little bit differently. They're just kind of autonomous and only really join you during fights. Now, speaking of which, you will occasionally get into a fight, which covers the second major segment of the game. Fights take place on a hex-based map with various terrains, some of which may offer benefits, for instance cover and the like. In the upper right is the turn order. Characters are ordered by initiative each round, so you can tell where your turn is coming up. During your character's turns, their portraits, currently equipped weapon, and action points are listed in the upper left. Each turn, a character may perform actions that deduct from their action points. For instance, firing a single shot from a gun may cost 3 or 4 action points, moving to a hex costs a point, and so on. If you decide you don't want to spend all of your action points, you may end your turn by using the defend action, which turns your remaining action points into a defense bonus, or the focus action, which turns your remaining action points into a bonus on your next attack. All in all, it's pretty standard turn-based combat system, vaguely reminiscent of the Fallout series, although admittedly a little bit simpler. However, the fleeing mechanic is a little bit interesting. When you initially start the fight, there are certain hexes that, if you get to them, allow you to flee from combat. Where the non-standard part comes in is that once you've done enough damage to your enemy group, progression hexes begin to come up. This actually allows you to flee the combat without having to wipe out every enemy and get the same experience as if you had, effectively gaining a win by running through them. This can save resources or allow you to escape a fight you've technically won but are still in bad shape from and probably may not finish, while still allowing you to progress the story. It's an interesting mechanic that fits the genre well, and I'd honestly like to see it in more games. Once combat is ended, you are given a quick summary detailing the experience you earned, as well as the opportunity to pick up items that you may have missed. There is also a camping mechanic as the game goes on. As time progresses, your characters will grow tired and need to rest, and you'll want to rest in order to treat their wounds and such anyway. Camping allows you to not only rest your characters, but for those with certain skills to use their skills during using camping points. Each time you camp, you get a certain number of camping points, and characters may allocate options until they run out of points. Characters with medicine and psychology can attempt to treat wounded or unsettled characters. Things like science, medicine, or the occult can be used to research items. If you research ingredients, you can potentially uncover new crafting recipes that use them, while using the occult skill on artifacts can uncover their unknown properties. If your party doesn't have this capability, you can also go to Schmidt's Antiques to get an item looked at. There's also a travel screen for when you exit Arkham and head cross-country. This can really only be done when locations are uncovered outside of town, and it requires a certain number of rations to reach any particular area. As far as presentation goes, the art style is a very pleasant, illustrated style, mingling with stills that look more like some manner of comic book. Each area's map is well detailed, bringing that decrepit, oppressive feel forth. The sound design is atmospheric and foreboding and goes a long way towards maintaining the excellent atmosphere of the game. There is no voice acting outside of the initial intro, but I think that's actually for the best, given some of the other flaws that I'm about to point out. Finally, the UI is usually pretty clean and easily navigable. In these terms, at least, Stygian fits the bill well. The writing is well done, I thought, at least mostly. It kind of tries to walk this line between classically Lovecraftian and something a little bit edgy, and I fear in some instances it veers more into the edgelord side of things, but, not all the time. And, that's really unfortunate because when the writing stays away from being all edgy, it's actually pretty good. Aside from that, the game does have some flaws. The use of skills is sort of all over the place. It seems a few of them are way more useful than others in the game. Further, some quests seem a little bit unfinished. It should be noted that when I do these Indie Game Friday looks, they're usually not full reviews, but rather a quick review of the overall systems based on a few to several hours of gameplay, because I firmly believe that with indie games, many times you're really looking at the core gameplay itself as the most worthwhile thing to look into to determine whether it's fun or not. With that having been said, even in the afternoon and some change that I've spent with Stygian, I was getting the feeling that some of the quests were either incomplete or the choices made within them were irrelevant. At one point, I seemed to have angered one of the main NPCs, only to find I could simply walk out of his store and walk back in, and he treated me just fine. In another quest, I reloaded a few times to try the different choices presented, only to find that they all led to the same result. And then to top it all off, when I finally was about to wrap things up to compose my thoughts, I got a crash to desktop while exiting a building. That's not the only bug I encountered either. During combat a few times, I got one of the spellcasting NPCs that you get to cast a spell, only to find out that I couldn't easily walk around or attack thereafter because it had bugged out the highlighting on the actual map. Now these bugs are minor, mind you, but they're still annoyances, and they just managed to squeak in on my initial look at this game. All in all, this gives me the impression that Stygian just feels a little bit unfinished. Oh, it's completable. There are many who have finished the game, and it is enjoyable in my opinion. It just doesn't seem well polished, and the overall game structure seems to bear more in common with a choose-your-own-adventure style of book or a point-and-click adventure, which actually brings to mind a certain other game, this one by Iron Tower that I recently did a Let's Play on my secondary channel, where it felt less like playing an RPG and more like playing a game book with a tactical combat system tacked on. This one has a very similar feel in that regard, and I feel like the engine could have been used for a much deeper game given the time to develop it. So is it worth it? Well, that depends on if you're a true fan of Lovecraftian horror. It's got great presentation. It's got decent writing and passable gameplay. And I honestly can say it feels more Lovecraftian than many of the other Lovecraftian genre offerings out there, and there are so many of them now. I honestly thought it was quite enjoyable, but the lack of polish is a little bit telling the further into the game that you get. And I know I say you can catch it on sale or find it in a bundle a lot on these reviews, but there's a reason for that. Now, I believe in this case the price tag for this one would have been really spot on if it was in slightly better condition. But since it is what it is, I'd recommend catching it on sale. That'd be probably your better option. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday, Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones. As always, I'll put a link to where you can pick it up below. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you are still watching, I would like to take the opportunity to thank my supporters, the top tiers of which are listed on the screen, without whose support I would not have been able to offer the variety of content that I have on this channel throughout the years. If you're feeling particularly generous and would like to join them, you can support the channel. There are a variety of options to do so. I have a Patreon, a Subscribestar, as well as channel memberships enabled. If you are not in a position to contribute, simply leaving a like, a comment, or sharing my videos are all wonderful ways to help the channel grow without spending a dime, and are all greatly appreciated.